I'm gonna probably post with some Mickey tongue-in-cheek thing, but do we all want to
what your podcasts are missing is beards.
All right, my other one I was gonna be like, we were gonna paywall right from the beginning, but we're gonna give this one for free
because we know you all want it. So
we know you're gonna paywall before even hearing a sample. Will, I was joking with Scroggins, but I think you'll appreciate this. Do you think we could potentially lean into some of the Tumblr spaces and say we're like a proactive, all accepting speech impediment podcast, and say that we're really woke because we don't even think for a second about the fact that our one of our leaders has a speech impediment. That's that's kind of
also very woke because now that we say it, we also talk about that all the time. So we need a virtue signal.
I feel like I've always had the potential to play the victim card with my speech impediment in some way, and I've never really figured out a way to, when I wrote my college essays, I realize now, I should have been my college essay should have been all about how hard my life is because of my speech impediment.
We were right before the window where that shit really mattered. But no, I mean, Will, this is what if we get popped off with some controversial episode, and some people are like, who are these three idiot white men speaking bigotry? To be like, who's the bigot now? Speech impediment, bitch.
Oh, bitch.
Hello, welcome to the Humble Ass Godcast. We got your hosts, Will Sampson, Matt
Hi, Mickey,
and Mickey Liberta. Everybody's greeting them in the most cordial way they know.
Scoggins, we can't see you unless you're making some sort of noise. So why don't you make a noise and flip us off?
Well, wait. We actually, hold up. We can restart this.
I love you guys, and this is how I show it with this finger. Hey, guys, you're both number one.
Life is confusing.
We could make it so there's different video modes, but either way, I think most people just want to see the talking heads, right? That's what we are. But we have gathered here today to discuss everyone's favorite pope, the pope that is currently the pope. I think, I don't know.
He's definitely one of my favorite popes. A lot of Catholics don't like him, but I think he's doing a good job.
We like him here on the Humble Ass Godcast. I think that's one of the most resounding consensus that we have.
Their verdict is out on me. I'm not saying I don't, but I'm also not saying that I do. I'm undecided.
Yeah. Okay, I'm also slightly undecided. There are some confusing things that the Pope has done, but as a Catholic myself, I submit myself to the Pope's authority, and I'm cracking a beer. Here's to you, Pope Francis.
Here's to you. I like him because he's Argentinian, and they have great barbecue culture and wine.
This is true.
They also acted as a. Go ahead. Sorry.
They also might be influenced by the Nazis in some way, but maybe we'll get into that.
Oh yes, one of my favorite operas ever. Or is it an opera? Musical? Evita, don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is, I never left you.
Oh man, that's the big hook of this podcast is we get to listen to Mickey sing opera, which I've always loved to do.
That was actually pretty cool. I like that.
And this is why I like this Pope, because I'm going to go right to some of his Argentinian heritage, which is loving swag, baby. So yeah, we were gonna focus right on his bigger news story, but I think this one, NPR, they flooded their airwaves with this hot take, and they were like, wow, the Lamborghini, what is this? What is he doing? Is he driving it? We don't know. Is it electric? Does he support ESG investments? All these questions are being hanging over our heads right now.
It would be really cool if that was the new Pope mobile, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I am down with that. Yes, do it. Do it. Oh, do it.
The Nazi Pope guy, he was really sad because he just had to.
He was not a Nazi. He was not a Nazi. He was in the Hitler Youth, but that.
I knew that was going to be a sensitive one, but his mobile sucked. Let's just agree on that.
Yeah,
that is true. Yeah.
It's a Lambo, right? Or is it a Ferrari? I'm sorry. Will, correct me.
It is a Lamborghini. But I should say, you all, speaking of Ferraris, our listeners might have noticed that our humble ass Godcast branding is a playful echo of the Ferrari branding, and I think that this is a joke because being Christian, it's important to be humble, and I think that there's nothing that screams the antithesis of humble rather than a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. But as G.K. Chesterton says, Christianity is all about paradoxes and being able to navigate the paradoxes of life. So though we are humble, our branding is based on Ferrari, and though the Pope is humble, he didn't even keep the Lamborghini. He just signed the Lamborghini and donated it to charity. I kind of wish he had
done one lap. He should have done one lap around Saint.
Yeah, President.
I always forget what's the one in the Pope's place.
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's, yeah, of course, that's what I meant.
Should
have done one little, like, he should have done the burnout, like the whatever Tokyo drift, around the big hugging, the big hug,
Is he with it enough to do that though?
Oh yeah, this one's way coherent. I think that was the issue with our Hitler Youth one. We won't say Nazi, we'll just say Hitler.
Well, there is a lot of mystery to why Pope Benedict the 16th stepped down. But it is true that Pope Francis does have knee problems, so we should all pray for him. But so if the Lamborghini was a stick shift, and I do honestly pray, dear God, I pray that Pope Francis is aided with his knee problems in the name of Father and Son and Holy Spirit. But I would have to point out, I don't know if you or our listeners have seen the latest
nice snowball Scrago, by the way. Sick Mike, baby.
I got this because I'm if I didn't get a mic, I wasn't taking it seriously, but I have to set it up, so we'll see how it goes.
No, it's gonna sound better halfway through.
But can I ask you all? I think I think this is an important thing to say. I don't know if you all have seen the latest Fast and Furious movie, but it's awesome. No. And there's there's a whole sequence of them saving the Vatican. And like, it would be really cool if they had added into that sequence some shots of Pope Francis like burning out in his Lamborghini.
Maybe we need threat. I got to get out of here. Oh, the helicopter already got taken down by an RPG. I guess I'll have to take my Lambo.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
3, 2, 1, Cat Cam. This is brought to you by indoor-outdoor cat owners who do care about their animals. Hey, Mr. Wayne. Say hi, Bean. Stop licking your butt. Are you going to lick your butt or are you going to do something cute? What are you going to do, Bean? Oh, the ear scratch.
Here we are on Middle Earth, and humans are between angels and animals, so we must appreciate our animal friends today. Anyway, back to our fabulous fresh.
But Will, you were still talking about a joke earlier. What isn't a joke, I should say, for our listeners, is the Humble Ass Godcast website, which is still sort of going through some interesting. Can you guys not see that?
We can't see it yet.
Oh, wait.
And weird. Also, we should point out to our listeners, it's not important that you see us with this video. You can just listen. But if you want to look, you can see our awesome branding.
We are 95% an audio medium. But today, you get to see the beautiful, glorious Ferrari ass. Should we give him a name? The horse? Obviously, it's Jesus, the defender of
No. The mule's name is Ferrari ass from this.
Ferrari ass.
Ferrari.
No, wait. Should it be a little more Italian? Ferrari Assisi or something.
Oh, Ferrari Assisi.
Ferrari Assisi.
We just lost all of the Italian listeners. They're like,
well, there's St. Francis of Assisi, so it's like that. I don't know if that's a thing. That's a thing where I live. But Ferrari Assisi.
Yeah.
But I think maybe when we're in our more in our cups, it's Ferrari ass. But the website is great, kids. Please go look at this beautiful. I love this texture effect, Will. This was so well thought out, and respect all around.
Well, thanks, Mickey. And that quote that you just showed, Numbers 2:22 is a very interesting tale about a talking donkey in the Bible. God has a sense of humor. So if you want to see God's sense of humor, check out Numbers 22.
See, I had this. Did you guys ever have any Mormons in your life?
Yes.
Yeah, I had this one great Mormon family. They were so amazing. Love them. Really respectable libertarians too. All Mormons believe you have to have 1 year of provisions to feed your family. But either way, he told me this Bible verse, and I always thought it was like bullshit. It was God tied his ass to a tree and walked 5 miles. Is that Moses? Moses tied his ass to a tree.
Oh, we should really is that in there? We should add all ass related Bible quotes.
Well, the thing is,
to our website.
I never found it in my regular, Christian upbringing, so I figured it was from the Mormon Bible. And Moses tied his. Oh, this is from the Harvard Crimson. Well, it seems to be a debatable myth. So, but regardless, we've strayed too far from our subject matter, I would say.
Well, let us
return to the Pope.
Thanks for repping the podcast, Mickey.
Well,
or the website.
HumbleAssGodcast.net.
Yeah,
coming to your TV browser shortly. We'll
it's
30
it's
seconds ads on Fox News.
It's not .com, it's not .org, because we're not commercial and we're not an organization, but we are a net, like the fishing net that St. Peter threw over the side and caught all the fish when Jesus told him to do it. And I don't know about you all, but I'm trying to be a fisher of men with this net.net.
I am a fisher of men.
Oh, he's singing again.
Yeah, that's a great song by
Light It Up.
That would be a good outro song. I think I shared it with you. It's a great M Ward. But we'll get to that at the end of this. But let us begin with our major content, which is the discussion of Pope Francis and his recent scandalous takes on what the American Catholic Church is becoming.
I think in the technical Catholic sense, I don't think that it is a scandal. I think that he's bringing more people into the fold. But sorry, Mickey, what did he say?
Well, I'm being sympathetic to our American Catholic listeners who might be conflicted or probably unaware of this subject or conflict. But he has lamented the backwardness of some American conservatives who say he insists on a narrow, outdated, and unchanging vision. Interesting. The American conservatives are the traditionalists when he is the Holy See, as they have said for so many centuries. But I think we're just going to start this off on a cold take from the New York Times. We thought about different ways to introduce this subject matter, but let's go to the old New York rag that is indisputably
I'm glad you got the rag in there.
Deceived us for many years, but no, they usually get some of these things pretty clear. And when they deal with Catholics, and again, it's the East Coast, they have to gingerly deal with the Catholics. They're generally pretty objective. So
otherwise, there might be some like car bombs in their future.
Yeah. So this is reporting from August 30th. Jason Hurwitz, Ruth Graham. Here we go. Pope Francis has expressed in unusually sharp terms his dismay at a very strong, organized, reactionary attitude opposing him within the U.S. Roman Catholic Church, one that fixates on issues like abortion and sexuality to the exclusion of caring for the poor and the environment. The Pope lamented the backwardness of some American conservatives who insist that a narrow, outdated, and unchanging vision is holding them back. They refuse, he said, to accept the full breadth of the Church's mission and the need for changes in doctrine over time. I would like to remind these people that backwardness is useless. Francis, age 86, told to a group of fellow Jesuits this month. 86, the age that Biden would be if he gets reelected. Either way, he seemed a little sharper than all. But he was in Lisbon. Doing this, you lose the true tradition and you turn to ideologies to have support. In other words, ideologies replace faith. Now, this is something, just to intervene here and say that we went pretty hard in on the old Protestant church, but the American Catholics have every reason to have just as much criticism of not necessarily their branding, but what they drive down into their, constituents. And then
Hear, hear.
And the dioceses are not all equal. There are certain more influential dioceses than others. So what we're talking about here, though, just to cite this, if anyone wants to look it up, it's from the Vatican-vetted Jesuit journal La Civiltà Cattolica, which was this is a transcript from a conversation that I don't think the Pope necessarily thought was going to get transcribed for the public, and this is why this is an interesting subject matter.
And Mickey, can I just point in
Please,
just a little more editorializing? I read the interview or the transcript of the interview translated into English, and I don't think that the Pope in there actually mentioned anything about American Catholics focusing too much on abortion. I think that is subtext that you could read into some things that he said. I've heard that as a critique of him.
Yeah.
As the Catholic representative here, I mean, it's very noticeable that very prominent American Catholics, and you guys won't know these people, but like Al Cresta, who has been running a very popular radio program on EWTN News for a long time, and also Matt Fradd, who is a very popular and prominent YouTuber, though he's always threatening to get off YouTube or saying that he's going to get kicked off. Both of these guys are extremely critical of the Pope. Or maybe I shouldn't say extremely, but they are very critical of the Pope. So the thing is, what the New York Times, how they summarize that, there's a lot of editorializing going on in that language. I think what the Pope specifically said, and they did quote him, is that conservative American Catholics are backward looking. That's the theme of what he said. Yeah.
And it's perfect timing that the next quote I want to pull up from the article is how they sort of ran a long distance with a minor word in his quote about abortion issues. And again, I don't think this isn't the episode for this discussion at all. He uses the always dangerous grammatical however. So he says, Francis explicitly wrote that caring for migrants and the poor is as holy a pursuit as opposing abortion. Our defense of the innocent unborn, for example, needs to be clear, firm, and passionate. Equally sacred, however, are the lives of the poor, those already born, the destitute, and the abandoned. More or less giving sympathy to what American conservatives would call liberalism,
Oh, well, and so Mickey, thanks for calling me out on that. I when I read the article, I didn't jump out to me. So I guess he did actually say that. Yeah. This
is the New York Times summary, and again, I don't think the subject of his hot takes were really mostly about that. It was mostly talking about the renegade Catholic faction, which again is probably running a little bit from a lost in translation thing, and so. That's what I think we wanted to mostly shift this conversation to. So, so should I just continue here a little bit?
Well, I want to actually just throw something in that I've heard, just listening to Tom Woods too, obviously, who's like a Catholic. That's one of the things he's made a comment about, is that there's a lot of things that get reported in the American press that it's editorializing goes on. He says something, American news or English language news translate in a way that makes it much more provocative and actually kind of changes the meaning of what he's actually trying to say much of the time. in order to just kind of, I don't know, maybe just they're misinterpreting things to drive up clicks, obviously.
Well, and
Of
so,
course,
and
yeah.
can I just add to just some background from Catholic world about
Yeah.
the backstory behind where this kind of dispute came from. I talked about in our previous podcast about Christian branding about Vatican II. I won't go into all that again, but so since Vatican II, which was in the 1960s, there's been a big push in the church towards kind of updating the church to be a good instrument for the fishing of souls, to be pretty much I think it was Pope Saint John Paul II. I think it was him, or maybe it was John the 23rd. Said the main theme of Vatican II was evangelization, and Francis is very much focused on that. I think there is another movement in the church that kind of wants to really stick to the church's traditions, and I think that both of those sides, but both of those forces are important. On one side, maintaining tradition, but on the other side, making that tradition attractive to spread the gospel. And so the thing is, the mass used to be said entirely in Latin, and now it's been changed that's said in the language of the people, of the congregation. And in America, there is a movement. There's a strong movement of people wanting to go back to the Latin Mass, and they do have a good argument that the church should not adapt itself to the world, that the world is a fallen world, and the church must be holy and must lead souls towards heaven. So I think that is a good argument. But on the other hand, and I said this in our previous episode, I don't know if I would have converted to the Catholic Church. I don't think that I would have if the Mass were still being said in Latin. So there's this tension, and Francis is very much a pope that is leading us towards he's called the Pope of mercy, having mercy on the world and towards the evangelization. And I think that can I just point out one other thing, that Pope Francis is the first pope to really reign in the time of social media. So as you said, Mickey, did the Pope know that his comments to these Jesuits was being recorded? He's the first pope to really live in this age where everything that he says is being transcribed. And I just want to put on the end here, the issue of abortion in America is a major moral issue in our times. So in this podcast, we don't mean to downplay the importance of that issue. It's just that is we're talking specifically about the Pope, and this is not particularly a podcast about the subject of abortion, right, y'all?
Which is a political policy issue. But
no, I mean, it's also an issue of killing humans.
Let's move on to let's move back to but no, what you were saying earlier, Will, is like this sort of does give some balance to the fact that, like, we were talking about the raw marketing aspect of the religious pitch of the modern Protestant church, and in the 60s they were probably ahead of the time, in some ways, of saying, like, we need to drive traffic, make it more opening, we have kids that are running off to become homeless hippies. Like, we need to save them in the Catholic Church. So yeah, let's cut Latin. It was like they probably did stave off their numbers loss. And I actually think the Protestants are probably shedding more numbers now. Like I don't know what the exact Catholic versus Protestant church attendance is. In my city right now, we had a big issue where it was they had to cut down dioceses because there was just not enough funding to maintain individual churches. So I know that all the churches are suffering with traffic.
Definitely, yeah. That's across the board. Yeah.
And I use traffic as a marketing term, but I'm talking about people walking.
Yeah, we get it. It's
Well,
appropriate.
I mean, we could also be talking about human trafficking, which is so an issue.
We're not
But
gonna
we're not
open that
talking
can.
about
Maybe the
that.
churches need to traffic some more
Uh,
more illegal immigrants.
God help
Love
us.
the Catholic Church.
Yes.
You know? We all know those ones from the South are coming in Catholic. They're abusing the numbers. They're cheap. There ain't no illegal Dutch immigrants. The last Protestants. All right, we were talking about. Let's get back to this article. I was gonna go into. So this is interesting, Will. So what are the American Catholics doing? I don't know this guy, Cardinal Raymond Burke. Is he a guy to know?
I also don't know him. I don't. Yeah, I
right,
probably
well,
should. But
Well, let's just skip this part then. There's some other interesting stuff I saw at the bottom here. All right. So this one was good. Okay. So here's going back to the Pope's comments. Speaking to the Portuguese priests this month. Any Portuguese jokes? I had a Portuguese
good one,
friend
Scroggins.
at elementary school. I had a kid who was from Portugal and he spoke Portuguese. And I asked him, I was like, can you just like speak some, or no, it was the opposite. I'm screwing this up in my head. I said, can I just speak some gibberish and can you tell me if it's Portuguese? And I just did one of those. She's like, I think you said one word in there that sounded thing. That's how I related to foreign.
It's so sad, man. Like Brazil did such a better job with their language than Portugal did.
I mean, Brazil does a lot of cool things. They're a chaos city.
Brazilian Portuguese is better than Portuguese.
Yeah, possibly. Believable. My mom just came back from Portugal. She brought me a Benfica shirt. I'm excited. It's a soccer club. Either way, the Pope says, the Pope doesn't say this. New York Times says about the Pope, speaking to the Portuguese priest this month, he noted that over the centuries, the church has changed its position on issues like slavery and capital punishment. Good ones to change on. He says, the vision of the doctrine of the church as a monolith is wrong. When you go backward, you make something closed off, disconnected from the roots of the church, eroding morality. His comments were in response to a question from a Jesuit who said he was taken aback when he spent a year in the United States by harsh criticism of the Pope from some Catholics, including bishops. Some people, the situation of migrants, for example, is a lesser issue, the Pope said. Some Catholics consider it a secondary issue compared to the grave bioethical questions. Don't know about that. But focusing on issues of sexual morality and downgrading issues of social justice, he said, clashes with the vision of the true church. That a politician looking for votes might say such a thing is understandable, but not a Christian. Okay, this is a hot take from some Pope or some bishop that came back from America. Okay, yeah, let's just round this out and then let's finish this conversation. Francis has steadily thinned out and isolated the most vocal and in some cases aggressive American conservative clergy, declining to promote some archbishops to cardinals and so denying them voting rights in the conclave that chooses the Pope. In other cases, he has simply waited them out and accepted the resignations when they reached mandatory retirement age. I didn't know anything about
Which means that he's basically just your average Democrat.
I mean,
I also
this is
didn't
interesting.
know
This is
anything about
interesting.
this.
Yeah. All right, there's like 3 more paragraphs. But the American Bishops' Conference remains a redoubt of Catholic conservatism, much more conservative than Francis and many of the other national churches. On a flight to Africa in 2019, Francis seemed to acknowledge a well-financed and media-backed American effort to undermine his pontificate, saying it was an honor that the Americans attacked me. Wow, that's kind of badass. When asked about Americans' conservative media complex. On the return flight, he was asked.
And can I just ask, Mickey, like, why do you call that badass?
Well, I mean, I follow some of the political happenings in South America right now, and like in the left is winning in South America. There's only like Chile and Argentina. Chile might have already fallen. Like there's not many like just American bogey governments, CIA-backed governments left, and that's why Argentina is actually one of the ones that's sort of more American aligned now. And and they just threatened to switch to the U.S. dollar as their currency, which is crazy. But either way,
he's talking about Javier Milei. I know all about him, but go ahead.
Yeah. My point is,
what makes that badass? Like,
I believe so. One of my favorite,
clearly dripping some sort of bias in my ear. So what is your bias?
One of my favorite writers is Borges, who's the great magical realist from Argentina. Argentina is a very dynamic and unique place, and I just feel like this guy is an intellectual that understands. People say that like the second most multicultural country in the world is Argentina after America. Like they have many examples of the same struggles that we've had, and produce great art and unique ideas because of it. So I respect people that come out of that, but they're a little more left leaning because they're South American. I like that. So that's what I think is badass.
So you're saying that you think left leaning is badass.
When it's truly anti-hegemony and about self-sustaining individual governments that want to just do their own thing and lift up their impoverished people. Yeah, I think that's
okay. Noted.
Okay, can we get out of? We've got your bias noted now because I'm about to go on a rant.
Wait, I have one last.
No. I actually want to bring.
I want to get paragraph. Okay, no, go ahead.
Here's the thing. I actually have an angle I want to take this discussion in because I'm curious about this.
Pope.
What is it? Okay, so I'm a Protestant. I grew up with a Catholic neighbor. To me, the idea was within Catholicism is the belief is that the Pope is basically a direct example of the apostolic tradition of the basically like kind of something like the voice of God on earth, so that what he says is kind of almost considered like what the Protestants would consider Holy Scripture. So how is it that you can be a Catholic and then also be like legitimately, I'm going to criticize the Pope and say this about it? So, I mean, Will, you probably understand more of this more than I do. So why don't you kind of like inform at least me? I don't know if Mickey knows much, but I mean,
wait, real quick before Will, I want you to respond, but I'm just going to read this part I skipped over. In a public letter released last week, Bishop Strickland, I guess the renegade, whatever American one, warned that many basic truths of Catholic teaching would be challenged at the synod, and hinted ominously at an irrevocable break. Those who propose changes to that which cannot be changed are true schismatics. They're calling for a schism. That's what the New York Times article was hinting at.
Yeah, I mean, so this is really, I mean, as a Catholic, I mean, part of this is it's very sad. I mean, there are major conflicts in the church. I'm also I have to note I am a recent convert, so I don't fully understand all of it, but I feel like I am a truck driver, and I spend about like 11 to 14 hours a day listening to pretty much nothing but Catholic content. So I feel like I'm like Neo in the Matrix. I've been a truck driver for a year and a half now. It's like, now I know Kung Fu. Or says I'm not the most informed Catholic authority, but I very much care about these issues. And so Scroggins, your question is a great one, and I understand how outside the church it would be a little bit hard to understand. For centuries, people, so certainly here in the United States, hated Catholics because of these damn papists, like we fought the revolution to have democracy, and they're just going to have us be ruled by the Pope. But strangely, these days, I mean, at least from what I hear, the people who are most critical of the Pope seem to be Catholics. So what's going on there? Scroggins, a delicate point of church doctrine, and you kind of hinted at this, is the infallibility of the Pope. The Pope is is a direct apostolic successor of Saint Peter, who in the Gospel of Mark, and I think in other Gospels, Jesus tells Peter. These were actually just recently, just the past 2 weeks. These were the gospel readings at Mass. First is the Mass where Jesus asks, and y'all, I am going to bring this back. Jesus asks, who do the people say that I am? And people say like, oh, people say you're John the Baptist, or people say that you're Elijah. And then he asks, who do you say that I am? And Peter responds like you're Christ. You are the Son of God. And I forget, that's not verbatim, but that's the message. And then Jesus says, Peter, you Peter, whose original name was Simon, but Jesus renames him Peter, which means rock. You are the rock on which I will build my church. That was the gospel reading 3 weeks ago. Last week's gospel reading.
I never realized, real quick, Will, Peter petroglyph, rock.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what that word
Latin
comes from.
Damn. Fuck yeah, Peter. Hell yeah.
Wait, you never knew this before?
I never put it together. I had this thing when I watched Austin Powers for it took me 5 years to realize Mini-Me was just the words mini and me. I thought his name was Mini-Me. Sometimes those things don't click for me.
Okay, y'all, I do have to say,
go ahead, Will.
my phone might randomly run out of battery here, and I do hope that and then I'll just switch to not having my microphone. But I'd like to finish this point. The next reading was can you all see me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. The reading 2 weeks ago was when Jesus is telling his disciples, I'm going to go. We're going to Jerusalem for me to be killed. And Peter says, no. Peter pulls Jesus aside, and it's like, Jesus, no, like you can't do that. No, Jesus. And Jesus says to Peter, this is after Jesus has said, you are the rock on which I will build my church. He says, get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
And Peter, Jesus, is referring to Peter as Satan. What's going on here? What I think is being said there is even though Peter is the rock on which Jesus builds his church, doesn't mean that Peter is perfect. Doesn't mean that everything that Peter is still human. So there's the and I'm bringing this back to the Pope. There is the office of the Pope, which is the leader of the church. And I hope God correct me I hope I'm saying this right. And please, our listeners, if I'm wrong about this, please correct me. But I think that this is how I've heard it said. The office of the Pope is infallible, but the Pope himself is human and be fallible. And
we have
and
evidence of multiple schisms throughout the history, so we shouldn't that would be ridiculous to say there's been one singular line, because
but so Mickey, one thing that is interesting about the history of the Catholic Church is people have left the church. There have been very bad popes. There have been popes who had many children and whatnot, but the popes themselves have never actually changed the teaching of
tradition.
Jesus.
The traditions have never changed.
It's a do what I say, not what I do. But they never changed the doctrine or the dogma of the church to fit what they do.
Let's ask this though real quick. So do we feel like the Catholic Church is even having a culture war influence anymore? I associate pro-life with the Catholic Church, and they won their victory against Roe v. Wade. What is left with the the culture war heritage, if we're going to talk about what that used to be, which again is different from what the Pope was saying. I guess I'm trying to say is what is the role right now of Catholics in America? So, and can I just point out the final note of the things that I was saying is there is Catholic teaching, and then there are things that the Pope, who is the head of the Catholic Church, might sometimes say, and then there's our current day and age when everything that person says is recorded. So
I think that Mickey, Pope Francis, I don't think I don't think he's pushing for a change in Catholic doctrine. The issue is a difference in emphasis. Do we emphasize the plight of the poor or the plight of the unborn more?
Well, the thing I would say is, because I
issues.
actually read the transcript that Will sent me of the thing. I didn't read the New York Times article, and that's very clearly what he's talking about. In that he's talking to multiple Jesuits. They talk about that. There's the schism in the American Catholic Church versus the one in Argentina, other parts of the world.
Yeah,
but very much the point is that I mean, look, it's a lot of transcript. I probably spent a half hour and I didn't finish it. But I mean, yeah, he basically is talking about what Will said, is where he's emphasizing the plight of the poor, and then as the body of Christ, that you're supposed to be tending to them and hoping that their material conditions improve, and you should be someone who's advocating for that. So I mean, yeah,
Mickey, I think that your question, Mickey, about what's going on in the culture war. I think I mean, Mickey, you love chess. I also love chess, but I'm not as good at YouTube. So the question that I think is a great question is let's assume that this culture war is against the devil. What is the best chess moves to make? And like, I have to say, I think that the chess moves that Pope Francis is doing, which is like Pope Francis is challenging the church, I think, more than he's challenging the world. And I think that makes the church stronger. But it's a very complex, multi-level chess game that's being played. So Mickey, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think to your question, how is the Catholic Church participating in the culture war? I mean, I have to say, it converted me. I think it's doing pretty good.
Well, and this is where I want to try to round this out into our general zeitgeist of the podcast, which is that we're all somewhat sympathetic to traditionalism, but we all have different ways maybe we want to see it enacted out. And like, I'm sympathetic and, very, as I've told you, Will, when I went to Catholic churches as a Protestant, I loved their experiences. Like, it was ritual, it was spirituality, it was magic. As a kid, it felt really cool. And like, I think they have a lot to offer. Obviously,
it's not
they've,
magic. The Catholics are important to point out. It's not magic, but yes, okay, yeah.
But for my mind, I was always a scientist. I was always a scientist. Right? I knew something was up, but either way, it was more fun to have that as opposed to have just somebody lecturing you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go to school on Sunday, but somehow they called it Sunday school. What a terrible branding once again. Either way, I just think that to fill out this, the final comments. Let's just wrap up the final comments that New York Times thought was relevant. And then I think we just go into what Catholics are they conservatives? Can you have liberal Catholics? I want to know more about what the future of Catholicism.
Joe Biden is a Catholic and a total
I guess so.
disgrace.
Joe Biden's not a Catholic. Joe Biden is the incarnation of Satan who calls himself a Catholic. No, and he's just there. He's a Catholic because he heard someone fallaciously say that you could sniff all the children you wanted if you were a Catholic.
Yeah,
that's why Joe Biden.
He's one of the rare Catholics that got into it for the pedophilia, not because he was molested as a kid.
Oh, Lord help us.
Hey, I'm not trashing the Pope. I'm trashing Joe Biden. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, most of them, it's a recurring cycle. He was like, "Oh, who these guys? Whoa." But either way, so after this great badass quote, the Pope says, "It was an honor that the Americans attacked me when I said shit about the American conservative media complex." On the return flight, he was asked about the sustained opposition from Catholic conservatives in the United States, who had accused him of driving traditionalists to break with the church. Francis said he hoped it didn't come to that, but wasn't necessarily terrified of the prospect either. "I pray there are no schisms," Francis said at the time, "but I'm not scared." Badass Pope.
Fuck yeah.
BAP. That's the new BAP right there. Bronze Age pervert. That guy, he's kind of annoying on Twitter. He retweets a lot of gay shit. He loves like male bodies. Like, okay, maybe I don't want to see abs because I'm ashamed of my bold beer belly. But
this podcast is now.
But these weird right-wing fitness nerds, they love retweeting abs.
Well, it's like I think the thing with I don't know, we're getting into BAP now. I mean, the thing with BAP is that it's like,
the new BAP is the badass Pope. Let's stay on the Pope.
Badass
Pope. I faded that.
Can I just say, I mean that I think that, and for our listeners, I'm sorry I had to unplug my nice microphone because my phone is running out of battery. I mean, inadvertently, probably many of our listeners, I didn't know who BAP was till recently. But Mickey, you bring up an interesting thing there, which is homophobia, and I have to say that I've had many gay friends in my life, and I but an issue with Pope Francis has been that he has been not in church teaching, not in church doctrine, but things that he said have been very open and in inviting to gay people. In the interview that we read, I think he had some really good comments about that, and I agree with him on this, that just because somebody has been tempted in ways that are not, I mean, are this is a little thing that I have to say. This is just my own thinking. There's an obsession over gay people in conservative media and conservative thought. What about fornication? Fornication in Jesus's teaching is in the Bible teaching is as bad as being gay. And so what's the point? Can I finish my point, please? Please, can I finish? The point that the Pope is making, I think, is whatever your sexuality is shouldn't get in the way of you coming to church and being in communion with Jesus.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't think people need to go to church when they're in their searching years. I think it's good that people have a phase between 15 and 25 that they go and spiritually go into the desert, I don't think we should be shaming people for that, but we should actually make it normalized to get to the phase that most of us are at right now, which is like, oh, I just got to do a job. I got to get into a regular life. Like, I wake up on Sunday mornings. If there's a good soccer game, I'm smoking weed and watching that. But if I had a spiritual center, I would go to church, which is only 4 blocks away from my house. And it seems like a badass church. They have great fish fries. I go buy their fish.
So, Miggy, by your logic, isn't it about time for you to go to church?
Well, the thing is, what am I incentivized with? Like, this is where the Protestants have it right, where they have actually like spicy hot take, liberal, like tight jeans guys that are being like, have you thought about not watching YouTube motivational videos and watching me instead?
The thing I wanted to say, I think it's funny. You were like, you should. What you're saying is you should sow your wild oats and get it out of your system, and then whatever. But the thing I would say about that is using the metaphor of going into the desert. When Jesus did that, he went to go battle Satan by depriving himself of food to be tempted, and he did not give in to temptation. So I don't know, kind of a weird metaphor to hear, like, go hog wild, and like the metaphor is actually doing the opposite of that. It's like doing the most intense things and not giving in and being disciplined.
Well, that's what, like, I mean, I think we would like young people to think it's like, I'm going in and giving in to the most intense indulgences and not giving into conservatism.
Gay, Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey, you have talked a lot about abs and tight jeans.
And then you're it's so gay, and I like following it though. But
what's really funny is, like, I feel like my friend in high school, she told me about queer theory in like 2007. I feel like I was way ahead of the game with like, oh, this is so logically cool. Like it's a way to transgress our conservative values. Because being a feminist liberal in the Midwest was a reactionary thing, you know? And so
Yeah.
thinking about anything outside of the traditional gender roles made you feel like a radical, you know? So I did feel like a radical as a kid.
Well, and Mickey, can I just add to that as a footnote? I remember many years in college where I think more you than me, but we were surrounded by all these like blue-haired kids, and we were in this kind of, it wasn't a frat, but it was pretty much just like a frat for like weird outcast people, and all the queer people, and you and me, I remember
we were the anti-frat.
There was this longing to like, I'm just like a straight guy, but like, can I call myself queer too, just to be cool, you know? And I mean,
like, I thought about it like, no, I really thought it was a philosophically like reasonable point of view, you know. I was never faking it, but I never actually felt it, you know, if that makes sense.
Mickey, can I challenge you? And then like Scroggins, I'm just kind of echoing what you said in a but you know, like if we are in this podcast talking to young people, because like young people could spend their 20s as I did, you know, being really confused and like doing a lot of weird, you know, substances and definitely, you know, doing things with your genitalia that, you know, just lead to nothing but emotional and physical problems.
What did you do?
You know, or
what did you do?
or what you could do is like spend your time.
That's not
nice, Scroggins. I don't know.
That is not a dangerous act. I thought you guys were talking about like, you know, the what are the sissy cages or the penis traps or whatever.
But what you could do is spend your time, you know, I mean, I think a lot of people want to be able to not use the language of God. So we can say just like being creative or being successful or doing something to contribute to the world. But the language that I would use is being what God made you to be and getting better at it and spending your time, spending your core years. The thing is, Mickey, like, I think in our society, as you said, like it's pretty predictable and okay for people in their 20s to pretty much waste their time. But the point of that is to realize that it's a waste of time, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, 100%. And historically, people did their time wasting between like 14 and 18. You know, it's like we are so much doing the Arrested Development thing right now. And this is where let's round it back out to spirituality can add structure and add the most important thing in my mind that is losing in 21st century, which is shame. You should feel shame. You should feel ashamed of failure. I failed at 2 different business ideas. I sold my soul to a nonprofit that never, you know, paid me $10 an hour when this rich ass motherfucker was driving in a Porsche.
I didn't know that, you know? That you actually sold your soul to him, Mickey. Damn.
I didn't, but I felt like it. I'm just trying to say as like my professional development. Either way, I've had a bunch of losses. So I get the fact that it's not very easy to be idealistic about being saved, you know. But most people feel like they've been hard done without actually being hard done yet. And those people need faith or they need purpose, you know. And if they don't have a purpose that really makes sense for them, they probably need God, you know, because they're going to find drugs. And this is where we were talking about it for a lot of, or deaths of despair. Any way you can get to the point of losing hope is a moment when hope wasn't saved from some like function of society that was Catholicism, Protestantism, anything, you know, like that had been there before, you know.
And Mickey, I think that's a great point you're making. And just, you know, just to bring this back to the Pope, the thing is, as a Catholic, I mean, the abortion issue in America and across the world is just horrible. I mean, I don't know if you all have looked much into that, but it's, I mean, this is my bias, but it's, I mean, if you look at that, what an abortion is, and what, you know, it's cutting an infant to pieces inside of the womb. I mean, that's a really horrific thing. You know, gay people, you know, that's all, you know, hard stuff. But in a way, and I hope my fellow Catholics listening to this podcast just roll with me on that. You can get so focused on those things that you end up giving yourself an excuse to not care for the poor, which is one of the main things that Jesus says. Jesus, if you look at the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the afflicted, blessed are those who thirst for justice. In America, it just seems. I mean, y'all, I was driving through Denver the other day, and the fire department, there was a fire truck pulled up like just in a turning lane, and these firefighters were out with their boots and they were panhandling. And their whole thing was fill the boot. I mean, the degree to people panhandling, it just like the amount of poor people in America. And I have to say, as a Catholic, I don't see the Catholic Church doing anything really. I mean, that's not true. There are soup kitchens and whatnot run by the Catholic Church, so there are things being done. But the average Catholic who you see talking a lot about abortion and gay people, you don't really see them doing much to help their neighbor in the street who's like currently ODing on fentanyl or whatnot.
All right. Well, Will, I want to end this with, first off, we don't agree on this issue, so I'm really happy that they have a reason to shut the fuck up, because it's going to be decided by the states from now on, and that's what federalism was supposed to be. Let me go to like the Pope's in this transcribed interview. His final words were, speaking of worries, obviously one thing that worries me a lot, without a doubt, is wars. Since the end of World War II, wars have been incessant all over the world.
Yep.
And today we see what is happening in the world, referring to Ukraine. There's no point in adding words. They were trying to bait him on this. And again, there is there's always a non-aggressive option to any solution. And in Ukraine right now, I think we see a war of resources. It's very clear. It's not some malevolent force. It's somebody that wants to have neon gas to fund the battery making operations of the future, which is what the Donbas is. It's Russia grabbing resources. So it's a resource war. And the Pope has been clearly saying, we need to stop battling. We need to stop murdering. If somebody, in this case, wants to retake territory, they did it. That's what happened in 2022 when they swept in the spring. They grabbed some land and they've been holding it.
Do we
just call it there? We call it there.
We're talking about politics. I don't want to get on this. Like, let's talk about.
Let's save the Pope. Honestly, let's save the Pope's opinion of of the Ukraine war for another episode, guys. Because we're at an hour. So let's get to final comments.
Well, let's
in perspective of what we were saying
have
earlier.
a comment.
In perspective of what we were saying earlier, though, he's saying, like, without a doubt, war is the biggest issue. That's what his final statement in this interview was. So, Scroggins, go ahead.
I mean, it's like, look, we can. Here's my thing. If you want to, you brought this up, Mickey. So, if you want to talk about it, I like. We said this today. Like, we're having these conversations to talk about religion and God in the modern world. Like, if we want to talk about abortion, if we want to talk about homosexuality, if we want to talk about addiction, if we want to talk about poverty, you have a religious perspective and persuasion on that. If you want to be about being anti-war, okay, I guess you could say some religions kind of are pro-war. There's some reasons for that, but I'd say for the most part, most modern religious people don't really want to have a lot of violent conflict if they can, stand to not have it in their lives. So I'm fine to talk about that, but I don't want to use the Pope saying something about being against war as a backdoor into having an argument about Ukraine. Okay, that just
I don't think any of us are entirely.
You just fucking did that. I don't care what you say. That's the way you fucking What that
You're
whole
right.
thing?
I was trying to spice it up.
You
I was
fucking
trying to
did.
spice it up for a final like kick, you know.
I don't want to have a fucking argument. It's like I don't want to talk about this in the context of this fucking podcast.
I would point out that you know what the Pope is saying is that since World War II that there's been incessant war, and
Exactly.
it seems that the war in Ukraine is the next thing, you know, is the next. But I would also point out, I mean, we are recording this podcast on September 11th.
Ooh, I forgot about that.
And that I think that war, I mean, to just like majorly shaped our generation. I was just thinking on this September 11th about, I mean, it's just horrible, all of the people who died, not only on September 11th, but in the ensuing wars. But I also think our generation has now been doomed to mistrusting everything, mistrusting our government, mistrusting the media, mistrusting each other. Everything is a conspiracy theory. Everything is ironic and whatnot. So Scroggins, I mean, I get your frustration that we shouldn't make we shouldn't make this podcast about the Pope, you know, now about politics. But I would point out that the church, there's a lot of history of the church being trying to be pulled into politics. In America, we focus a lot on the separation of church and state, with this idea, you know, this ignorant idea that what that was made to protect against is to keep the church out of government. If you look at history, obviously that idea exists to keep the government out of the church. And if anybody wants to research more about that, I would encourage them to look up King Henry VIII.
Right.
But so you just like the thing is, when talking about religion and talking about the Pope, I think it's very natural for us to start talking about current events and current problems, because Jesus Christ, the founder of this church, created the church, I think, as a way throughout time to deal with whatever problems come our way. So I do feel you, those Scroggins, that I think that we're dancing on in this podcast. Are we going to get off talking about abortion? Are we going to get off talking about war? And I do I feel you on that. That's a fine line.
I mean, look, if you want to talk about this in the context of 9/11, there's probably something to be said about this being cast as a holy war, which I mean, look, George Bush did say a bunch of stuff on 9/11 in the ensuing months about how, you know, Islam is a religion of peace, but he also kind of made a bunch of overtures about how this is a holy war, which brings up the Crusades, which is a polarizing and emotional thing for a lot of people along cultural and primarily religious lines. Because a lot of that was about the area that Israel exists in now.
We should definitely do a podcast about that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, there's an angle to go it down where we could talk about, you know, like the idea that you have 9/11 happens. You know, since then we've seen a dramatic drop off in like religious affiliation and like institutional like attendance of churches. I mean, some of that's a result of the new atheism being a response to what they see as a religious conflict. That's, you know, Sam Harris is famous for talking about how like Islam is doing all these things because they hate Christianity, which is not really the case.
Well, no, you know what's ironic is, as you were telling me about this, I was reading through the previous comments in his like final moments of this Portuguese interview, and he's really actually talking about like the process of the synod and like creating like, you know, like thought processes for the existing dioceses and how they distribute. And he was basically saying, like, speaking of worries, like I misrepresented. His worry is exactly what you're saying, Scroggins, is that we're going to over-focus on these wars and not focus on the actual ground preaching. And so I was mostly trying to tease, but for what we could be talking about in the future. And Scroggins, you did this well. And I do think we should get to our wrapping up comments. You know, Yeah, I'm very happy with seeing what we've seen from his interview. I think we have more to talk about Pope Francis. I think he's going to be a recurring figure of our conversation. So,
well, I think we should also, in the light of the fact that we talked about this transcript, which me and Will checked out part of, and you've got the cliff notes on, where he talks about the plight of the poor. There's kind of a contrast to this in that, the CNN article that we started this whole thing with, and then we didn't really talk a whole lot about, is about him getting a Lamborghini. Obviously, he auctioned it off.
We're gonna watch the Pope get his Lamborghini.
Yeah, no, but they say in filmmaking, make him laugh, make him cry, maybe make him angry a little bit. And I think that Pope Francis, I mean, he's a character. I mean, in this podcast, we've laughed and we've said fuck quite a bit. Yeah. This is what it's like to be, a leader who is actually leading. Not to bring up politics, but not always going for the optics of things, but actually leading. That's my final take.
He's got a line in the water. He's a fish or a man.